Brandon Nearing, work for Leeward Renewable Energy. We own and operate, 19 different wind farms throughout the U.S. This being one, Jersey Atlantic wind farm, 5 GE 1.5 turbines. To be honest, I just thought it looked really interesting. Like I've told you guys before, I actually went to school to be a pharmacist, and I was driving home and I just saw these wind turbines being built near my parents' house, and I thought it's just really cool. And I got curious over the week of being in town, and I just kind of cruised out there and asked some of the people that were building them, what are they, how do they work, things like that, because I was just really interested in it. And long story short, the whole green energy movement and wind turbines and how they operate and the mechanical aspect, the electrical aspect, like all of that stuff just really seemed interesting to me. And I decided, I'm going to put college on hold, and here I am 12, 13 years later. You need to have basic mechanical skills and basic electrical skills to start. A 2 to 3 week training course where they would get their certifications for climbing towers, for electrical work, for all different aspects of the job. And there's so many different certifications that you need. But the big ones again are being certified to climb and rescue your partner and help rescue in situations, electrical safety and knowledge, and obviously your PPE and how to use it, when to use it, and things like that. And then work with somebody who's competent, like a qualified electrical worker, and they can slowly teach you things on the job as you go. There's always a need for technicians. You get a lot of people that come in and want to be, they want to be on a site, so they're at the same place every single day. And then you have a group that travels all over the U.S., all over the world, really, doing maintenances, doing special projects, doing large correctives like changing blades and generators and stuff like that. There's so many different aspects, and there's so many opportunities. Basic maintenance is just like you would do on your car, right? You're gonna every couple months, or every 6 months, what we do is we go up and we check torque specs on certain aspects up there. You check oil levels, change out filters, do some cleaning, do some checks on your braking system, things like that. So it's just basic maintenance, and they've got a check sheet that's a couple hundred items long. It gets much more detailed than that, but the basics is oil, filters, maintain. These turbines are being monitored 24/7, 365 days out of the year, right? So there's somebody constantly watching them, and if it throws a warning or a fault and says, maybe there's a blade position error, so something with the blade positioning is wrong, the turbine will shut itself off, send an alarm stating that, and then we know that we need to either reset the unit because it's something minor that just needs to be reset, or it needs to be climbed and somebody needs to actually troubleshoot what the issue is and then go up there and actually repair it. Most of the time you see wind farms up on the top of a mountain or in the middle of a cornfield or the desert or anything like this. This one is, it was, for the U.S. anyways, the first or the closest wind turbine site to the shore. Obviously that's changing now, but and then just the fact that it's in such a busy environment, right? You're right next to these casinos, and then the biggest thing is that it's right here on the wastewater facility. It's not very often that you have structures or people near the turbines like that, right? So it poses its own sets of risks and concerns that we work with you guys on. If something was to fall from up there, it's gonna be bad. So you want to have your hard hat on anytime you're near one or around one. And then the biggest one is even in the winter. If there's a lot of ice and ice buildup, it'll build up on the blades, and then it can start to fall off. And you don't want ice to fall down and hit anybody or anyone. So we have precautions that if anybody here spots any ice or anything, they let us know, and we just shut the tower off and wait for it to naturally fall. See, these guys are trained, CPR, first aid, AED use. They're trained on all that. You can't even come to any of our sites without it. So they all have that basic knowledge, right? Because again, if you're working 300 feet in the air with a partner and something happens, whether it's work-related or health-related, maybe somebody has a heart attack, you need to know how to help them, because you can't just call 911 and expect somebody to show up tower, right? So what we do is we train all our guys to know how, at any time, how to rescue not only themselves, but their partner with special rescue equipment that's either staged up tower or you take with you every time you climb. And so these guys need to know, like I said, every situation, no matter where they're at. Maybe they're on the ladder and they fell and they're suspended. You need to know how to get them off of that ladder and take them down safely. Maybe they're up on the roof and they've fallen off the side. Well, you need to figure out how are you going to either get them back up or how are you going to help them to the ground. So this is actually a self-rescue bag. So what it is essentially 300 feet of rope and then a little device in here that you would use specifically for bringing yourself or your partner down. So again, this is all just rope, and then this is a unit that you would use. And you could either hook it up to yourself, and then you would hook this other end up to, a solid structure in the turbine, hook this up to yourself, and then you could essentially pull this down, and what it does is it slowly drops you at a rate of, I want to say it's like 6 feet a second, and it's variable, so it's got a little brake, and you could essentially, go out and lower yourself all the way to the ground. Now, another option would be, you could hook this end up to your partner, keep this on a structure up tower, like with me, and I could send my partner down I would stand up tower operating this because maybe he's unconscious or something happened. And then I could safely lower him to the ground so that, EMTs are waiting at the base by the time we get him down. So this little device is pretty nifty. There's plenty of other ones, but this is a self one. So this is on my hip every time I climb. And every one of our technicians has one of these with them whenever they climb. How long it takes depends on what kind of shape you're in, right? Or how much you've climbed and stuff like that. And I would say on average it takes 5-10 minutes, seems about right. This is one style of harness. There's plenty of styles out there, but this is one of the lightweight versions. So how you would work this is put this across your chest here, and then you can take this guy here, which is your lad safe, and you would hook this through here. And what this lad safe is when you climb the tower, there's a cable that runs from the top all the way to the bottom right in front of the ladder, and you would hook this unit up to that cable. And what it does is so that if you were to slip and fall or something was to happen, it engages on that cable, and then you're suspended into your harness. So you take the leg straps around here. This leg strap here, and again, then you'd cinch everything down, keep everything tight, and now you've got your harness, right? Your next one is you've got your lanyards. I've got two different styles here. We've got the shorter style here, and this is an absorption pack. So again, let's say I'm transitioning from the ladder into the nacelle or transitioning off the ladder. You always want to have 3 points of contact, whether it's 2 feet, 1 hand, 2 hands, 1 foot, whatever it is, 3 points. So if you're getting off a ladder, obviously that's not gonna happen. So this unit would actually be hooked under your back, and then you'd use these 2 units. If I was transitioning off the ladder, I would hook this onto an anchor point, and then once I'm hooked there, I can step off the ladder because I'm still on. Because the last thing you want to do is disconnect yourself from the lifeline that you're climbing on this guy and not be connected to something in case you fall, especially if you're near an opening. And then this is just another style, same thing, a little bit bigger, but it's got these D-rings. They're a little bit heavier, so generally like to keep these other guys on me, but it really depends on the situation and kind of what you're going to be working on. And then again, this unit would be hooked up to my hip or across my back. And that's pretty much what you would use aside from, safety glasses, hard hat. That's what you would use for typical climbing gear. These gloves here are just your typical class 0 gloves. These would be the rubber insulated gloves that you'd use when working on some of the lower voltage equipment. And these bigger guys here are for your high voltage work. So these are class 4. These are actually rated up towards 36,000 volts. Again, if you're going to use these, you've got this 40 calorie suit, which is essentially a suit to help in case there was supposed to be an arc flash or a blast. This is there to essentially save you. It's fire resistant, so it's rated up to all these cabinets have arc flash rating studies that are done to say if something was to go wrong, this is the arc flash hazard for that cabinet. And so depending on what that rating is, maybe it's high enough or dangerous enough that you need to put on a suit so that if there was a blast, which again, we generally everything we work on is de-energized, right? But at some point you need to de-energize it. And so if you do, you may have to use this suit depending on what site you're at and how it's configured. This is just a face shield. So again, maybe we're doing some cabinet work. You could essentially just use this guy, cover your face so that if there was a blast, you're not getting hit in the face with it. And then same thing for this little balaclava is, put it on, covers your neck, face, everything like that. And then this suit on, and then you could, do your switching if you needed to here. So you got your gloves. They don't move very much, pretty thick, but I like the fact that every day is something potentially different, right? Like we have our daily, chores that you do every day. You've got your biannual maintenances that you do every 6 months and things like that. So you have standardized stuff, but what you don't know is, what's going to go wrong with the tower, if it's going to stop running, what caused it to stop running, and then how you go about fixing it. I think that's the part that kind of appealed to me the most was, you're going into the office and you never know what you're getting into. I'm learning something, every day that I'm working on these things. And then obviously just the green energy side, that's always been really interesting and appealing to me. So I like that a lot. The worst part is probably your work schedule can be really, you don't really know when a tower is going to fall, right? So you have to be on call 24/7. Now, obviously you have different crews and different shifts, so not one person. But if you're that crew that's on call, you have to essentially be waiting by your phone if something goes wrong. For the most part, they run and there's no issues. But if they do fault, you have to respond within 2-3 hours, get out there and get them fixed and back online. When we know we're going to get hit with it, we have two options. You can either let the turbines run through it, or you can put them in more of a hurricane or emergency mode. And what that essentially is doing is just making sure that the towers have power enough to orientate themselves into the wind so that they're not catching crosswinds onto the blade and causing stress on the blades and stuff like that. So when the site loses station power, so if your house was to lose power, if we lose station power and we don't have it, my emergency generator will kick on, and it gives it just enough power to the towers so that they can still face themselves into the wind. And that's the biggest thing, is just keeping them orientated. They can withstand all those winds, but why add that extra stress if it's not necessary? It went really smooth. We had no damage, and all the turbines were back up and running within, I want to say it was two or 3 days after Sandy had passed through. We were back in normal generation. Some people say that they're noisy or that they're very loud and they're disruptive, but when we go out there, you're right underneath the one. And the biggest thing you're going to hear is just the blades as they come around and they're cutting through a whoosh, as they're cutting through the wind. If there's any other sounds that, if something doesn't sound right, then most of the time it probably is that it's got an issue and it needs to be maintained. Or, there's concerns that people have with, birds and fatalities and bats and things like that. And while those are real, the numbers are, not nearly as high as what, some of the media wants to lead you to believe. There's, much bigger issues than wind turbines. But we do full studies that, we see what kind of birds are going to be in this area, what times a year on all of our farms. And, we've actually had sites where during certain times of the year when we know migration's coming through, we actually shut the whole site offline. Light flicker is a real issue. If the sun is coming from a certain angle and it's going to cause the shadows as the blades go around to kind of cut across the land. And if you were to have, a turbine sitting right outside your window and that was happening at a certain point of the day, certain time of the year, it takes all that into effect, then that shadow would essentially keep, rotating by. And so that is a real issue, that what we do when we're building, the wind farms is we try to make sure that, you don't build them near any structures or any houses. Typically, when a site's built, it's built with, a 20 to 30 year lifespan planned out from the beginning. And then generally, as you get closer to that, end of the time frame, you have a couple options, right? You can either re-up the contract and extend the site for X amount of years. It's not like just because they're planned to run for 20 or 30 years, they have to stop right then, right? They're still capable to keep running. You could essentially decommission the site and tear the turbines down, or you could do, a repower project, which is essentially, kind of modernizing them, putting a bigger generator, maybe some bigger blades on, and getting a little more power out of each unit. This site has never had a major component failure, which is really good because the site's been up 14 years now, and we've never failed a single blade, never failed a single generator, gearbox, no major components whatsoever. So no crane work, which is great to hear, right? Because that can get pretty expensive. These towers, obviously, you've got, like we said before, generally they're in the middle of a cornfield or a desert or a mountain, and they're going to be the biggest structure, right? So they're obviously going to get struck quite a bit, and these towers do get struck quite a bit, but there is a grounding system built in through the whole turbine, all the way down to the pad, down to the base. Same thing with the blades. They're going to take strikes on occasion, and again, there's a grounding cable that runs from the tip of the blade all the way down the tower, all the way down to the base of the tower. So yeah, it's totally normal. But that being said, when they do get struck, obviously that's a lot of power, right? So it can cause blade damage, whether it's cracks or splits and stuff like that. And then usually what we do is, at least twice a year we go out and do blade inspections, and we make sure, hey, do we see anything that looks like, from the ground? And then if we need to, we can bring in a drone and do some drone pictures to get a better idea. And then your options are, you can either rappel down the blade by rope and do the repair, or you can bring a basket in and essentially go up there and perform your blade repairs. These blades here are all made of fiberglass, right? It's wooden fiberglass. So in the event that we do have a blade failure, it's pretty easy to bring that blade down, and the first thing we would do is we would just refurbish it. If it's not refurbishable, then yeah, you can definitely just cut it up into smaller sections and then recycle it, and that's what we have options, but recycling is generally the route that we would go. As the wind blows and it changes directions, the towers slowly orientate themselves to find the wind. And then what can happen is if they keep twisting one direction over and over and over, obviously the cable that goes from the top to the bottom gets all twisted up. And if it twists too much, it'll break. So obviously you don't want that. So what it's got, we've got sensors in there that essentially say once you've wrapped up, 2 times, 2.5 times, whatever that manufacturer states, it'll stop itself. It senses it. It stops itself, takes itself offline, and then slowly rotates the other direction. It'll untwist itself. Usually takes, 20, 30 minutes. And then once it's untwisted itself, it goes right back into run. If you're driving by and you see, none of the towers are running, right? The first thing to ask is there any wind, right? Because 9 times out of 10, they're not running because there's just not wind. Or if you see, 1 or 2 running and 1 or 2 aren't, again, it's usually because there's just low winds, and some of those turbines are, reading a little bit of a higher speed over here than they are over here. And, just because it's rotating real slow doesn't necessarily mean that it's, actually producing energy. It's kind of tracking the wind and ramping up, right? But if you've got really high winds and none of the towers are running, well, then maybe we've got, some sort of a utility issue, or we're doing, substation maintenances or something along those lines. But that's pretty rare. If the winds are up and maybe you see, 1 tower offline, there's a couple things, right? It could be that we're doing a maintenance. Probably not the case if the winds are up, because we generally want to do maintenance when there's no wind so that we're not losing energy. More than likely the tower had some sort of a fault, and the crews are out there actively repairing it. I think the best route for somebody, if they were trying to get into the industry, I think the best route to go is to look around for local technical colleges and institutes. There's a lot of smaller colleges that do, wind programs specifically for this, so they teach you, PLC logic, they teach you, basic electrical, mechanical, all the little things that you're going to need to know. And most of them, what they do is they actually get you all those certifications we talked about earlier. They get you all of those certifications. So they put you through all those courses so that, once you're on site, the company doesn't doesn't need to go through all that. They've already, you've already been taught.